I'm Catherine Trendacosta. My official title is Director of Policy and Advocacy at the Electronic Frontier Foundation. That generally means that I write about tech policy. I have certain issue areas in which I'm an expert, and unfortunately for my mental health, uh, I am tasked with sort of keeping track of federal legislation and our responses to it. Um, Jason, we'll go first.
My name is Jason Koebler. I'm a co-founder of 404 Media, which is a journalist-owned tech publication. And before that, I was the editor of Motherboard over at Vice. I write a lot about privacy, surveillance, how AI is destroying the internet, and try to find fun things that are not so depressing sometimes around that.
I'm David Roth. I work at Defector Media, which is a worker-owned co-op that mostly is about sports, but not entirely is about sports. I used to work at Deadspin, and most of the people at Defector also worked at Deadspin. We all quit in October of 2019 due to ownership trying to do stuff to our website that we didn't want them to do. And yeah, like as with Jason, write about a lot of stuff that sucks and try to find a way to make it fun or readable, I guess.
Full disclosure, I have written for Defector
That's
multiple
true.
times,
Yep.
covering the writer's strike mostly. And it's a delight. And I will say some of the easiest interactions as a freelancer you will ever have is with Defector, which I know is actually a goal you guys have.
Yeah, it means a lot. That is something that I think all of us. I mean, I had freelanced for many years, and then Jason and I were briefly in the same newsroom at Vice. I mean, I've been in like a lot of different places, but not wanting to screw over freelancers or make them wait was like a real core value for not just all of us that had freelanced, but in terms of this is very grandiose for this early in the podcast. But if the idea is that Defector is going to be the sort of website that like is the change that we want to see in the internet, then like something like not making people wait 6 weeks to get paid is a good place to start. It seemed like
Going back to like trying to find good things, I similarly have that problem. But like I find both of your websites and the existence of that model to be one of those good things. And I want people to know about it and know that it's possible.
that's very nice of you to say.
Yeah, thank you. I was just gonna say that, I mean, talking about freelancers, it's like I was in charge of processing invoices at, Motherboard or back at Vice, and it was like trying to launch a nuclear missile to get someone paid like $200
Yeah.
sometimes, where you had to like get two signatures. You had to send it through this incredibly like Byzantine system. People had to send like a void check, which is somewhat standard, but also not that necessary. Um, and then it would go into this like accounting system that many people touched, and it was often like sent back. And there were periods where we were trying to get freelancers paid for months at a time, and Vice was very like notorious for having an incredibly complicated system. And then now I'm at 404 Media, and we are only, four people who own the company, but we also do have freelancers. And I realized you can actually pay someone instantly from
Yeah.
your bank account, like with no problem. And you can even like automate it so that if you have someone doing recurring work, it just pays them automatically and keeps track of it. It's like not terribly complicated. Vice, much bigger company. There's presumably some reasons for all of this like red tape that exists, which I'm sure we'll get into, how our model is different from the existing model. But it's like there's many things at these companies where it's like, why is it being done in this way? It makes everything like not work,
Yeah.
and then it doesn't have to be that way.
Totally agree with that. Vice has been like more so than, and I mean, obviously the experience at GMG with like being bought by private equity and stuff was like, it was the most unhappy ownership experience that I've had in my life. But Vice is still like the shining example of do not do it the way that they did it for me. Like everything about it was uh felt even when we were there kind of like backwards and like a grift, and the payroll stuff was like unbelievably like that. I remember accompanying a coworker down to like a different floor where payroll was to hand them a piece of paper so that we could pay somebody $250. It was just like the idea of this company that was at the time, because I think Jason and I were there around the peak of them like nearly selling themselves for billions of dollars to Sumner Redstone or Mohammed bin Salman or whoever it was that was online trying to get it, that they were, sort of holding themselves up as being like the future of media, in sort of in terms of their attitude and to a certain extent, the work product. And yet everything I saw in there was like the scenes in the movie Brazil where like they take a panel off the wall and all this fucking ductwork just comes flying out. That is like what the internal workings of Vice were to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was lucky enough that I joined Gawker Media sort of after its Wild West days.
Mhm.
For example, I joined at the tail end of paying bonuses for page views. Just
The Nissan administration.
just one of the most like deeply upsetting periods of time. Of
Yeah.
course, not as bad as bonuses for interacting with commenters, which came right after that.
That is real?
Yeah, that's a real thing for
Wow.
Kinja interactions.
What a great idea.
Just one of the worst experiences. Because like for some of us, especially if you're a woman writing about science fiction, as I was, going into the comments is not an
No.
experience I would recommend. I learned recently that a certain editor, and I'm sure you can tell which one, counted banning people as interactions for his reports.
What is a ban, really, but a one-sided interaction?
Yeah. A lot of what I see and what I like try to write about or like hammer home for when legislators ask me like, what about the future of news? Some of it I'm like, you're sort of like bolting the door after the horse has left and the barn's burned down. Because if you take money from tech companies now and give it to the owners of those websites now, it's going to be the venture capital firms that bought them all for pennies.
Right.
Because of what happened. So instead, you should look in the future and invest in rebuilding things. And I think like Defector, I believe, is doing sort of like trying to model that sort of stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, we haven't taken money from outside investors. But one of the things, we did just get a grant that we're going to be using for basically trying to centralize there's a name that Jasper and Sean came up with that I'm forgetting, but basically like a hub to sort of make it so that sites, that are the size of Defector or the size of 404 or the size of Aftermath or whatever, are able to do some of the back office stuff more effectively. Things that most of these sites are owned by people whose skills are in editing and writing, which are not necessarily exclusive of skills in terms of like logistics or basic business administration stuff. Like one of the big lessons of Defector is that all of that is much more learnable and much less mysterious than it seems when you're at a big company where there's whole departments that are dedicated to it. But part of the idea of what we're trying to do, like with that grant, is basically make it so that you can run a small worker-owned website in a professional and efficient way without having to, either be bringing in a million contractors or teaching yourself to be an HR consultant.
I often actually cite to Defector's annual reports for explanations of various things when I'm trying to explain the state of media in other things. I find them incredibly useful for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know the ins and outs of the various proposals to fund local journalism and, startup journalism through like taxing Facebook or Google for whatever. Like I know there's been various ones, but sort of what I see as a really big problem, and you alluded to it, is that a lot of the companies that are still around have been around for a long time, and they have pivoted their business models so many times over the last, 15 years, where they went after Facebook traffic, they went after, Facebook Live, they SEO'd everything. They, were working with programmatic ads, then maybe they try to tack a subscription product on top of that. And when you do that, these companies become like incredibly complicated beasts. And that is, in my opinion, why a lot of them are failing, is because they have so much kind of like middle management and people who are trying to correct the errors of a previous business model by throwing another business model on top of it. A lot of them are saddled with either expectations from venture capitalists to grow at a specific rate, or they're saddled with debt from private equity firms that they need to pay back in some way. So they're not starting from a clean slate. Like they need to make a certain amount of money to make up for these previous sins. And so throwing money at these sort of like broken businesses is not, in my opinion, going to work. And it's like there were many things that Vice did really well. There were a lot of parts of Vice that made a lot of money, but the amount of money that was needed to like keep that a solvent business was never going to be made back by like doing good blogs on the internet. It just like got to a point where it's impossible. And so I think that what is needed and what we've seen is things like Defector, things like 404, things like Aftermath. I think even I think that there's space for new companies that have a sort of more capitalistic approach, but they need to start without all of the baggage that has happened. And I think from what I know, based on a lot of these laws or the proposed legislation, is that it would be very easy for these broken businesses to get money thrown at them, but they've been mismanaged for so long that it's not going to fix the problem.
I think also the other point in favor of newer, smaller, and I think not just because like ideologically I'm predisposed to favor a worker owned model, although, whatever, cards on the table, that is my preference. The point that Jason made, and this was very much an evidence of Vice, but it's been true everywhere I've gone, like the least expensive part of any of these businesses is the part that produces the product that is for sale. It's the blogging itself. And when you see a lot of these places that are, when they're pivoting between visions and, business models and stuff, the people that are making those decisions tend to be paid much more than the bloggers are. Management is expensive. And that kind of bloat, I mean, even at a company like Vice, which was not around for that long and which always sold itself as this kind of like buccaneering, like our executives have tattoos sort of like approach to things. It's all the same shit that you see at any over inflated legacy business, that there is just like, there's people whose job it is to ensorcel money into being, and then there's people that make the product that is for sale. And I mean, I was thinking about this yesterday, the most recent round of layoffs at Eater, which is a 20-year-old website. It's I think a very, very good website. At this point, whatever their model is, and I guess this one is now that they're putting their emphasis on the app, the thing that people read Eater for, the reason that you would download that app, is that it looks good and the writing is good and you trust that the opinions are good. And the people that keep getting fucking laid off are the people that make it look good, write the blogs, and have the opinions that you trust. And so what's left is, however well the app works, if the information that's in it isn't the sort of thing that is at the standard that you're accustomed to from the site, then it's of no use to you. And I worry that that's like the end stage for these bloated companies, is that like a lot of administration, no actual content, and then therefore no real business for being.
What's really always fascinating is, as you pointed out, right, that's the cheapest part of it, but it is also the first to get cut.
Yeah.
I will say something, Jason, when you like were talking about like just throwing money at these bloated failing things, that's like a pretty consistent policy problem actually that we face at EFF too, in like things like infrastructure, which is like, well, we have all this money to build fiber internet, but we're just going to give it to AT&T and so on, who have refused to build it for decades and so on. Like actually in California, originally the thing we passed said that it cannot go to those companies because they've failed. It has to go to like municipalities and something else. And like, I tend to think just in general, that's why we keep seeing this is those are the people with lobbyists. And so they show up and say, we can fix your problem. Just give us all your money. And then they don't, but because no one's left, that's it.
Right. And I guess I want to tread a little bit lightly here because I don't know the ins and outs of it. But like from what I understand, and it has been my experience, but 404 Media is incorporated as a for-profit company. And the reason for that primarily is because we didn't know how to do it as a nonprofit.
It's a
But
lot more work.
yeah, and it's like we just wanted to get up and start posting blogs and like see how it worked. And we also wanted to create a business that was sustainable where it's like we're not reliant on grants and things
Right.
like that. But there are many rich people and foundations that want to fund journalism, but a lot of their grants have to go to nonprofits or they have to go there's like a lot of hoops to jump through to get that money. And people can do whatever they want with their money. Like I understand why that might be the case, but there's like a pretty high barrier to entry for a lot of these things to like, how do I qualify for this money? How can I get it? Like what is it for even? Like often you have to have like a very lofty project and that project is often not like I'm going to do blogs on a website and
Yeah.
over time like do iterative reporting that leads to incremental change. It
Yeah.
often has to be like a project. Whereas like on the right specifically, you have like super rich people funneling money to like Tim Pool through the Russian government. It's just like they're just like
Yeah.
throwing money and they're
Right.
like do whatever with it. And it's
Yeah.
like it's we don't have time nor the expertise to like figure out how to like qualify for
Yeah.
some of this money that it does exist. And that I think there's like really good like intentions, but it's just it's like too difficult to like get.
Yeah. In order for us to get our grant, there's a lot of because we're a for-profit business as well. And it's like they don't grants don't go to for-profit businesses. That's like the nature of that, part of philanthropy. And so we needed our fiscal sponsor. We had to do, I mean, luckily that the people that we have on our operations side are extremely capable and we're able to figure out how to do it. But part of like, the goal for us too, the reason that we wanted to be a for-profit business is that we wanted to be, and again, this isn't an ideological choice necessarily, but I think it does sort of align with how I understand it. We wanted to be what we are, which is a like stable and growing cash business that makes its money through subscriptions and through producing podcasts and doing all of the stuff that we need to do, to keep subscribers and to draw new ones. But the idea of it as I think like, you mentioned, Catherine, that we put our annual report online at the end of every year. We want to show, I think, not just the people that are subscribing what they're getting, but also to show that this business, which has been mystified through the, venture capital and through private equity and all of these other sorts of, making these companies seem big and valuable in a way that they fundamentally either aren't or cannot be, that you can turn a profit doing this. You can have,
Right.
28 people working on a website that mostly makes blogs and podcasts, and you can make more money than you spend. Like it can be done. It's just we're not trying to pretend that the next thing for us is that we're going to like get the broadcasting rights to SEC football or to, like we're going to have an NBA game on Wednesday nights. Like we're not trying to be ESPN. We're trying to be a business that lasts for years and years because it makes more money than it spends. And I think that that's like it's a fairly humble thing, but it is also like that is a reasonable thing for a business to try to be. And all of these other things that media companies and websites have tried to be, I think, feel doomed for the extent to which they reach beyond that.
Yeah, that's exactly what we wanted to do as well. And of course, 404 was extremely inspired by Defector. We're still for, co-founders. We work with freelancers. We have an intern at the moment. We've thought about how do we grow and how do we, hire people and that sort of thing. And, we're about to come up on our second anniversary. Hopefully we get to that point at some point. But a lot of my friends, people in the industry have said like, how do you do all the business stuff? Isn't it like very time consuming? Isn't it very complicated? Like how does one do this? And I hate to this is not meant to be a brag, but we found it to be incredibly simple.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because it's just like the business is very simple by design. It's like we put blogs on the internet, we ask people to subscribe. we have like the back end infrastructure that has gotten a lot better over the last few years with things like Substack, which we don't use, but like has made it a lot easier. We use Ghost, which connects to is an open source nonprofit and it connects to Stripe. But it's like we're not like knocking on the doors of our subscribers saying like, hey, where's your $10 this month? It's like it all happens kind of automatically. We see how much money goes into our bank account and we pay ourselves less than that. And
Yeah.
it's like
It's like,
that's pretty much it. And it's like
yep.
there are things that we've tried to do, like, like I gave a talk and I got some money for a talk. Like I'm like, oh, that's another revenue stream. But we didn't set out and say we are going to have like a subscription business, but then as David said, like aspire to be this incredibly like complex company that wants to return like 100x what we put into it. And we took no money to do it. It's like the infrastructure to do this has gotten so much more accessible over the last few
Yeah.
years, and that makes me like very, very happy because I've been interested in the business of journalism for a long time, and the idea of like starting my own website, it was like, how does one even begin to dream of doing this? And now it's literally like you click sign up on Ghost and you get a payment processor and a CMS and all of this. It's like it's kind of that part is easy now.
Yeah. And there is this like sort of growing like so 404 has, for people that aren't signed in on their site, Jason, correct me if I duff this, people that are reading blogs on 404 but are not logged in will see display ads, another classic way to make a little bit of money for your website. And we at Defector are doing the same thing. It hasn't made us a crazy amount of money, but it's another sort of faucet to open up because the paywall is not super duper hard. You can read a few free blogs per month. And stuff like that is like, we basically learned how to do that by seeing that 404 was doing it, reaching out and being like, are you happy with the guys that you have doing this? Is it something that, tell us a little bit about it? This community of sites that have started stuff up, we're all sort of not necessarily working with the same vendors, but a lot of times we are working with the same vendors or with the same sort of, platforms or designers or, people that are committed to this goal too. But we're all in this together just fundamentally in terms of showing that it can be done. And I think as one of us figures stuff out, the other sites start to figure stuff out in turn because we do talk to each other and because everybody is sort of invested in the success of this approach.
I think it's like the flip side of competition, right? Is community. And
Yeah.
like I think the difference is like the bigger attempting to be the best don't want to share any of that information and have an interest in it being as opaque and difficult as possible. Whereas like if you're committed to the project of journalism, that is not how you see the business side of journalism.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely right. However, a lot of people who have worked at really big media companies and see how bloated and broken they are have reached out to us and said like, "Hey, I worked at this massive magazine company for a long time. I know how to do this thing. Do you want me to help you do this thing like in my free time?" And there's also so many people at these companies who have been recently either laid off or they're like on a contract basis or something like that. And we've been like overwhelmed with support from both our very intelligent readers who will notice a problem on our website and be like, I know how to fix this because I'm a software developer.
Yeah.
Like, here's what you need to do.
That's
And
the real advantage of having 404 subscribers, whereas ours at Defector are all people that are attorneys and are bored at work. So, like, I guess they could tell us if we were libeling somebody, but anyway, go on, Jason. Sorry.
no, I mean that's been I never expected that when we started this, and it's been incredibly helpful. I mean, we try not to take advantage of that kindness. Like, there's been a few cases where someone has done some work for us, and we're like, that's too much. You did too much work for us to not like pay you
Yeah,
or
like
give
we
you
have
something. It's like we need to like compensate you in some way. But then there's a lot of other cases where they're like, oh, like I know how to run this like social media campaign. Like if you know, we haven't actually done this, but we've talked to people who have like done that at larger media companies. And so while the larger media companies don't want to help us, there are people inside of them who are like, I like this model. I think this model is cool. I want to either learn more about it or I want to just help it because I think it's something I want to see in the world. And so I'm going to, uh, you know, offer help.
I think it's interesting when you guys were talking about like how difficult it is to be a nonprofit. As like someone who moved from journalism to nonprofit, the people whose job it is to get money so that we can keep doing our job are doing a thing that is so hard.
Yeah.
And also a lot of us are writers or former journalists, and then being like, explain your work to us. And we're like, here's a novel I wrote about my feelings on tech utopia and tech dystopia. And they're like, that's not an actionable plan to give a donor.
Yeah. Well, this is something that we're actually, so next week, Defector is doing its offsite sort of retreat type thing. And one of the days that we're devoting to, like, you know, each of them has like a sort of overarching, you know, one of them is about our sort of vision for the direction of the site, and other ones are being sort of like, basically there's always a training at every one of these in terms of how to think like an owner, like basically teaching us how to read our own P&L statements and stuff. But we are doing one that is more or less about branding, that is like sort of trying to find a way to talk about what our website is to people who don't already know the story of what happened with us at Deadspin, or that are, you know, not already on social media in a way where they would be seeing us and the posts that we do. It's hard. I mean, it is definitely one of the, it's for all of the things that we have had to teach ourselves as a co-op, you know, where we're trying to figure out ways to like basic, like human resources, best practices in terms of like, how are we dealing with each other? All of that stuff basically have to learn from new, or, you know, from scratch. But the other stuff about being a business, like the stuff that, like, of all of the people that did different things at the media companies that I worked at, whatever the branding people were doing, I was like, good luck. Like, do not tell me what's happening. That's not important to me. And yet, like, it's all important. Like, we do have to figure out how to talk about it like that.
I used to say at Gawker Media, I was like, I think probably the smartest people at Gawker Media is the art department, a group of people who have to read all of these blogs from sites with completely different areas and interests, and then distill that into an image.
Like synesthesia, the blog into an image. No idea how Jim Cook's brain works, for instance.
Yeah. Everyone else here has like a specific beat and an area of expertise, and they have to read all of our stuff and figure out what it looks like. And like, that's kind of the same like branding thought of like trying to take 8 or more 12, 28 people's like vision for writing and like style, because it's important to have a distinct style as a writer, but like find the thread that connects all of that. At EFF we have a different problem, which is we have a really strong voice, but it means that like when things change, turning that ship can get a little bit harder, because like it's a lot of really smart people, a lot of lawyers. People want to dig in and they want to get everything perfectly right, and that's understandable, but it does make things a little bit different.
Yeah.
While I think our business instincts are good, because I think they're largely just like, how would I like to be treated as a customer / like, what do I like to read? Like, a lot of it is quite intuitive, and I think that we've made the right decisions for the most part. There's definitely things that real bigger companies do where I'm like, oh, like we probably should do that. We probably should figure out like consistent like branding for us. And like, I'm shipping our merch ourselves. Like, I'm wearing one of our hats right now, and you know, I get those made, and I think that we're doing a good job on that. But like, we have a Shopify page, for example, and some of the images are good, because when I first started it, I had a lot of time to take nice photos. But the sort of like recent hats that we're selling, it's like an iPhone photo of that hat on a
taken
desk
from the window of a moving car.
Exactly. And I'm like, huh, like clothes companies take pictures with like models or like in studios, and there's probably a reason for that. And it's like, I know the reason for that, but the reason I bring that up, and the point that I wanted to make, is that our product is our good journalism, and like we try to spend as much time on that as possible. And all of the other like ancillary stuff, like I think as long as we're getting the website right, the journalism right, it's like, if our social media like vertical videos are not like perfectly edited, there's a lot of like forgiveness there from the audience. And like if our product photos on the Shopify are not that good, it's okay. If I don't ship overnight, like I'm an Amazon warehouse and I ship like a week later, people have been really understanding. And I think that's been a really good lesson for us because I think that when new we didn't want to be a website where there was like an announcement that we were going to make a website and then like a 6 month waiting period while we like got everything perfect, where we were just like not paying ourselves anything, burning money, etc. And then we launch, and then it's like day 2 of the website. It's like, oh, like what do we do now? It's like, let's just go in with good intentions, try our best, and like if we make mistakes, own them. And it turns out that people really like that. Like
Yeah.
people are super forgiving if you make mistakes. And like, I shipped someone the wrong shirt once and they're like, I need to return this. And I was like, oh, okay. Like I shall figure this out, but I did not I hadn't like thought about our return policy, or like if someone wanted to cancel a membership and they forgot it, it's like we'll figure it out as we go. And you can figure out a lot of this stuff as you go without it being like a catastrophic thing.
Yeah. But the point that you made about like the central business being the blogs on the website is something that we are constantly trying to figure out, like how to balance that right in terms of everybody's time, because it's just a very similar thing at Defector that like Dan McQuaid runs the merch store and Luis Paez Pumar handles the streaming, and like, but those guys are bloggers. That's their job. That the main thing that they do is write about stuff. And so all of the rest of what they do, which can, if permitted, expand to become its own sort of more or less full-time job, we have to constantly be keeping our focus on the thing that is actually the core of the business and not making Dan spend his whole week soliciting designs for t-shirts and updating the store and doing all that. Because like what we need him to do is write Dan McQuaid blogs. People subscribe to read those, and people are understanding about it. That's been our experience as well, and it's good. And it's just also like, again, in the fantasy version of the website where we suddenly have $10 million that we didn't have before, it would be great to have dedicated people to do all of that. Not just so that, Dan would have more time to blog or Luis would have more time to blog, but because, people where that's their whole job are better at it than us, but you can learn it to a certain extent. And then, the rest of it is just a question of, more experience and more sort of acumen at it. But we've gotten better at it. And I think that the initial grace that we were extended when we tried to do this stuff and basically didn't know how to do it was incredibly valuable to us. And we're very grateful for it because, like, we are basically learning all of this shit in public. And that's not always pretty.
I think, too, part of it has to do with, like, the trust of your audience and also the fact that they understand that the thing they want is the blogs.
Yep.
And so if the other stuff isn't perfect, that's not what they want from you. That's not the reason they came to your website in the first place. And that's like, you can be much more understanding as a reader, because like the words are still there, and if there's a problem, I could just point it out. And like, because it's transparent, because it's not a corporate monolith where you send hey, this got broken into an ether and don't know what's going on, you can be more understanding about it because it's the story, or you're aware that it's not the New York Times or something that like should be able to do something like this quickly.
When we started, it was important to me that we did everything ourselves so that we like figured out what we were good at and what we were bad at. Like we were producing our podcast for the first few weeks, and I was editing the podcast. Joseph Cox was editing the podcast. We're both like reporters and writers, but I was like in Adobe Audition, like zooming into like little waveforms and like trying to cut and trying to make like the sound level and all that sort of thing. And I was watching so many YouTube tutorials, and there was like one moment where I was like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing?
Good use
with
of my time.
Right. Yeah. It's like I am teaching myself audio editing, like rather than writing an article or whatever. And it's like now we have a podcast producer, and I don't think about that at all. And it's been incredible to have a podcast producer. But I am glad that I tried it, and I'm like, okay, I'm bad at this. And also, here are the things that are important to us at the moment that we're in, which is like we don't need a podcast where there is like highly produced like soundscapes occurring while we're talking and that sort of thing. It's like pretty simple podcast, not that hard to edit for someone who knows what they are doing. And therefore, we knew when we got a podcast producer, like, here is what we want. Whereas if had I not tried, I think it could have gone any number of ways. We wouldn't have known what we needed. And so it's been nice to sort of like be able to try to wear all of the hats and then realize like this hat is not for me. I look terrible in a fedora. Like I shall not be I shall not be a video producer, you know.
It's also kind of liberating in the sense that figuring that stuff out, like figuring out first of all like what you can and can't do. It's pretty fun. I mean, that is basically like the nature of being a grown up, is like trying some new thing and being like, nope, too old to skateboard, can't do it. And like that's reasonable. Like that's part of growing up. But the other bit is we know what we ask our audience. We do the readership surveys every year, and we're basically like, what do you want more of? What, like, how do you want it? And then we're trying to sort of hit it. Like that is what the business is. And so for a lot of this stuff, knowing that you, as Jason was saying, that like if you're doing a podcast where you're mostly talking about stories that you have run on the site and explaining them, in a little bit more depth, sort of talking like a writer and an editor might talk, or like two writers might talk. If you know what that is, then you know like what you want it to sound like. It's a challenge. Maybe you do need to hire somebody to figure out how to make it sound that way. But the part of what is hard at bigger companies, I think, is that at some point you get to this level where people are thinking in a very airy way about their audience or what that audience might want, or they're not thinking about that audience at all. And in this case, it's like it's a customer-driven business. Like if you know what you're about, then you know what you're about. And the removing the extra noise that came with working at a bigger place where you never know if you're hitting the mark, that someone whose name you don't know and who definitely does not read your shit, if you're like trying to meet those expectations, it's way more stressful than if you're sort of like, all right, well, survey said this, should we have a politics blog or not? If they say they want more, then we'll write one. Like it's as simple as that.
I don't know if you were there, Roth, for like truly what became the gotcha question at Gawker Media not town halls, all hands, the name a blog from this website that you liked, of like management.
Yep. Yes.
It just became the like, it should not be hard, but became the like bog standard gotcha question.
Yeah, that was the end stage of the Univision ownership, was those guys, like them just sending some dude up from Miami to be like, you guys suck and you disgust me. Any questions? And then we would all just, like, he didn't know what we were doing. He didn't care about it. The signal example of that from Vice. So I worked at Vice Sports when I was there. A pretty small team. I still am like, those are some of my happiest times working in journalism. Like, just, it was a great group of people, and I'm really proud of a lot of the work we did. I also know that we did a lot of what we did because no one at Vice, not only did they not read about our stuff, I don't think that they necessarily knew about it. There was a period of time where Bill Simmons was breaking up with ESPN, where Shane Smith, who's the CEO of Vice, added him on Twitter and was like, come to my website. We're going to do Vice Sports. We're going to do it just for you. Like, you're going to be our little baby boy. And it was like, there's 8 of us sitting in a corner of this stupid fucking office that they built over 3 DIY venues and a gallery in Williamsburg, being like, it's already happening, dude. We've been doing this for a year and a half. Like, but I mean, I think we were happier for Shane Smith not knowing that Vice Sports existed. We got to write better blogs because he wasn't like reading it and being like, can you incorporate Pharrell into this? He's a friend.
I mean, to be fair, that was also Deadspin's relationship to Nick Denton.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Which is very different from IO9, where Nick would just send things to tips@io9.com because he likes science fiction, and he would just be like, I saw this story I liked.
Yeah.
You'd be like, okay, Nick, thanks.
Yeah. That sports firewall saved a lot of stress, I'm sure.
We have talked a lot of shit about our previous employers, respectfully, but one thing that was very helpful, I think probably at both, is that, to David's point, like, they basically left us alone to
They
do
really
whatever
did.
blogs we wanted to do, which I don't think is the experience of people at, I don't know, like a more straight-laced
Yeah.
publication. And I think that has made it a little bit easier for us to start these sorts of things
Right.
because we had the ability to like have a voice, develop a voice, have a point of view. And I think that that is something that's like quite critical to uh, standing out in journalism now. It's like both sides very boring, like reporting of facts is quite difficult to build a business around
Yeah.
where like so much on the internet right now is like personality forward, point of view forward,
Yeah.
voice forward. And I think that what like the US journalism school industrial complex has spent decades teaching young journalists is like you're not a part of the story, right? You must be as centrist as possible. You must be as fair as possible. And it's like there's a way of doing journalism that is fair to the people that you're writing about. Like we always are asking for comment. We always want to know what's going on, but also like not both sidesing
Yeah.
everything and not mincing words. I think that's why Defector, why 404, why Aftermath, why a lot of independent reporters and also places like Wired are like running circles around the New York Times right now, are running circles around the Washington Post because they're allowed to like use their brains when writing. And
Right.
I think that that's like very helpful and needed.
Yeah. Also, doubly important if you are asking people to pay to read your stuff. I mean, like as a business, you have to have a hook beyond. I mean, like the New York Times and the Washington Post can say, like, we are, the biggest and the best. We've got the most reporters, and that's true. And, to a certain extent, it delivers on the, actual value proposition there. But in terms of like getting people to read the stuff, I mean, this is, I don't know what Jason's pitch was to people if they ask about, what is 404. But for me, I thought Motherboard was one of the great websites like in the history of the internet, like that, and it really was allowed to flourish at Vice in a way that was surprising to me. But it is also, if you're then laid off and you want to go start your own website, if the site that you worked at before was correct and opinionated in a way that people gravitated towards, you can just say it's like Motherboard, and that's enough to get somebody to pay for it. I think for us it was similar to say like it's going to be like Deadspin but not exactly like Deadspin. It helps, and being able to use your whatever outdoor voice in a blog is like, it helps a lot. And I think, so it's also like, again, Wired, another incredible success story, doing that within a big like corporate publishing sort of apparatus is doubly remarkable. But they have been kicking everybody's butt since January.
Yeah. There are like times when I think about like things Nick Denton said, and I was like, he was a weird dude, but he wasn't wrong to say video was not worth our time. He wasn't wrong to say we're not here to make billions of dollars. We're here to just be profitable. Like, he wasn't like, there were things about that ethos that I think helped a lot, and also like is the reason you come out of it with a voice and an understanding of like the transparency. That was another classic Gawker thing, right? Like our union drive. But the other part of it too was the like understanding that being a removed observer is a myth and is actively harmful to your ability to be honest about your point of view so that people can decide whether or not they want to, rather than being lulled into a false sense of security about whether or not this thing has a point of view.
Yeah.
I want to build off and do some and talk about the next part, which I think is we kind of got to naturally, and then it'll be a little bit and we'll be done. Which is, Wired, 404, and Defector. Like, Roth is very self-deprecating, but like people really like having people with voices that they enjoy talk about things in a way that helps them feel like they're not alone at an island screaming. And I think one of the ways that 404 and Defector and Wired are sort of meeting the moment is the understanding that some like classic political reporters don't, that the norms aren't real. They're a thing we did for a while, but they're not gravity. You can't necessarily just depend on it. And I think that's like similar, like that's the kind of voice you're lending to this moment.
So at Motherboard, we wrote a lot about big tech companies, and one of my like proudest things at Motherboard was that we were not writing about gadgets. We were writing about like private. We weren't writing about like here's the new features of like the new iOS update, unless they had to do with like privacy or surveillance or something like that, which a lot of our competitors were doing at the time. I think that very few tech sites are doing that anymore. They are a lot more adversarial. They're a lot more sort of like understand the implications of how these monopoly powers are used against regular people, how they play the political game, like the impacts of this technology. And I think that they're doing a good job now. But we never really played like an access game with Meta, with Apple, etc. And what I mean by that is that like some PR person at Apple would be like, we're going to give you a 1 day like preview of this new feature and you can try it and you can write about it. And then the way that it would work would be like if you wrote a negative story about Apple, that person who gave you a like preview would be like, we're not going to do that for you again because you wrote something mean about us. And that there were all these like dynamics where it's like maybe they'll go to the sales team and say like we're not going to advertise with your publication anymore. And a good publication with good, you know, like norms and firewalls would say, okay, like we don't care, we're going to do the reporting anyway. But there were like all sorts of ways that like journalists would end up pulling punches probably to avoid like really upsetting these big powerful companies. And that was like at Vice we really were able to do most of what we wanted, but like in the back of my mind I was like, you know, Mark Zuckerberg can call Shane Smith if he wants or whatever. And I've had numerous like quite testy interactions with PR people at big companies at 404, and they're like we don't think that this is correct, like, or not correct, it's like we acknowledge that it is correct but we don't like it and we are mad.
We're
And there's
demanding a
like
correction all the same. Yeah, like
yeah,
on
they're
principle.
like there's no one for them to complain to. It's like you're talking to the boss, you're talking to the person who owns the company. Like it's I'm not changing my mind. There's you don't hold any sort of power over me. I have like a very good understanding of libel law and like being fair and all of that sort of thing. But I think that beyond sort of like the norms of both sides in journalism, there were like all of these levers for big companies, government entities to pull where they're like, I'm going to call my friend I used to go to college with who's an executive at this company and complain. And then it's going to become like an unpleasant like interaction for that journalist or whatever. And I think that that's like a real advantage that we have is like we are making up the rules of our publication. There's no one who is can tell us what we can do and cannot do. And of course we're going to be careful. Of course we're going to like be fair. Of course we're going to comply with the law and we have a lawyer and we have litigation insurance and all of this sort of thing. But like there's no one for the meta PR person to be like, Jason wrote a mean article, so like please fix it.
That's a real good distinction to make there too, because I think there's this understanding, and you can see it, I think, in a lot of the bad political coverage at a national level, where there's this conflation of norms with best practices, where the idea is that basically not just like sort of towing that line or whatever, but that like best practices are you call for comment, you make sure that your story is right, you check your facts, and you put something out there that's correct. And if you get it wrong, you correct it. Like that's not difficult. The norm part of that is all of the stuff that Jason was just describing, which is this sort of the relationship business that is, you know, sometimes it's at that sort of like elite level, but sometimes it's the sort of thing where, you know, if your job, as you understand it, is writing about the new iPhone, then you need to get it early, and you need to not write something that's going to make it impossible for you to preview the iPhone before everybody else gets to see it. Like those things are at the extremes are inimical with the idea of best practices. That the two things come into very serious conflict. And I think you see that with politics at this point, especially, in the current administration. But I just think in general, the idea of like playing the game in order to maintain access, in order to continue to produce this content, winds up producing worse content, or at least stuff that has less jagged edges.
Many people complain about the New York Times. I think the New York Times does very important work, obviously. It's a huge publication, does a lot of really good work. It drives me crazy that they're like scared to like quote a cuss word, like a swear anywhere. And it's like, I think that um, a lot of the complaints that we get from companies that we cover and things like that are like, they're not taking issue with the facts. They're just like you're like being kind of rude.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yep.
oh, okay. Like Amazon was like, you said a cuss word in the headline, and it's like, okay, like
Right. What can I do to help you with this problem?
I think that readers are like they're not begging for like swears in their headlines necessarily, but I think they're begging for like journalists to treat them like they are like real people who contain multitudes. And when something is outrageous, for someone to say like, "Hey, this is outrageous."
I think people are looking for peers and like people who maybe have an expertise they don't have, but share something else, like a shared language or a shared experience to help them understand things. Versus, like, I think you see this in a lot of spaces, which is the like, no, I'm the expert, you're wrong.
Yeah, I think that it's also to both of those points that there's I think that readers really respond to this. It's something that I always try to sort of bear in mind in the stuff that when I'm writing and editing, that like being acknowledged as a reader as also being a stakeholder in the story, and it not just being about this conflict between other people, that like you're reading it because it matters to you. Like you should not have to, suss out the secret meanings of my tone and word choices to understand what it is that I'm trying to say. Like that stuff is, I mean, again, it's basic customer driven, best practices, but it is also like at the higher levels when elite media doesn't work, it's has this idea of sort of like, tablets from the mountaintop being delivered down to you. And I think beyond being in kind of poor taste to me, I think that like you have to remember that the person reading it is there as well and is in it for, a specific reason.
I think on that point too, it's like it's not just necessarily like the highbrow sensibilities of the New York Times, et cetera. It's like the many content mills out there that are churning out like very SEO heavy, written for algorithm, like aggregated stuff, which I've done a lot of aggregation. I've done a lot of like SEO optimizing in my day. It's like it's how the internet has worked for a long time, and I know many good journalists who have gone from doing stuff that is looked down upon, but they were never sort of given a chance to do stuff that was like maybe a little bit more complicated or reported, and they have that ability. So I'm not trying to talk down upon that, but I think it's like readers are used to logging on and scrolling different social media feeds and being fed like highly optimized content that is either uh like written for robots primarily. And I think that if you write an article, especially now that we're seeing so much AI generated content out there, it's like if you write an article and you sound like a human and you show that you're a human, and like in a lot of our reporting, we try to explain like, here's how we did this story. People really appreciate that because they're being treated like the audience because they are the audience, whereas many publications and many just like social media influencers, etc., treat their audience as the algorithm. It's like, is this going to hit in the algorithm?
Or just like you're basically that feeling of being like tricked into clicking a headline to find out which is very like old fashioned, like 2012 internet craft. I've noticed lately that a lot of like really minor sports transaction headlines are written this way to basically, the one that I was laughing at the other day was, this guy's already cycled out of the organization, was Mets add World Series champion outfielder to bolster bench. And that sounds cool, but it meant that they'd signed Travis Jankowski off waivers from the Rangers. He was there for 5 days. They designated him for assignment, and he's on another team now. That this is, I mean, I knew that because I'm an idiot and I was aware that the Mets had signed Travis Jankowski and was kind of like, nice, it's a good defender. But there's also like, if you don't treat the people that are reading the stuff that you're, or the people that you hope will subscribe like people, I don't know what hope you would have of ever converting them. Like, why would somebody who's being treated like an algorithmic victim like see themselves as being like
Well,
someone that wants to get into a partnership with you as a subscriber?
it's also like a fascinating problem because like people are writing for the algorithm or SEO, but like that puts you at the mercy of those tech companies.
Yeah.
Rather than the thing that like Defector did well, which is like, we know we have an audience that will come to us, and we don't need like, it's say like we're producing things that make people want to come here regardless of how they find their way here.
Yeah.
Not because they searched what time is the Super Bowl and ended up here.
The challenge with this, though, and this is another thing that we'll be talking about at the retreat, is that we have attracted a good subscriber base. It's a good business. It's also hard to fucking find people. Like, I don't necessarily know how people are finding stuff now as social media is dying and Google is becoming unusable, and AI search stuff is a blind alley. Like, it doesn't link out. So that aspect of it, like, we have to please the people that we've got, and we have to do good work to try to convince other people to subscribe. But it is very, like, one way or another, the algorithm is messing with you, and it's a very challenging thing. Like, even if the whole of your business is designed to sort of liberate yourself from that, it still
I think if we had launched we launched in August 2023, and I feel like around the beginning of 2024 is when things like Twitter started fracturing, obviously, and like there's so many different ways that people find things on the internet now. So much is AI slopified, etc., and it's just become extreme. Like, discoverability on the internet has collapsed, and it's a really big problem for legacy media, but it's also like a really very, very difficult problem for someone who's trying to start something new. And that's like I woke up one day, I think in January, like a few months after we had started this, and I was like, we need to aggressively try to expand our email list, because it's going to become extremely hard for us to reach people who are following us on Blue Sky, who are following us on these social media platforms, because the audience will fracture. And so it is a big challenge. It's a challenge for every media company, but I think that like relying on these algorithmic like distribution models is super hard. But growing your own distribution model is very fulfilling and nice, but like super incremental. It is very, very difficult. Like, there used to be a time where you could like publish something and it would go viral on Facebook and you get 1 million people to read it in a day. It's like that doesn't happen anymore. And so like figuring out that top of the funnel, as they say in corporate speak, like we are big media execs, is like really difficult. And we've taken to just literally begging our readership to tell their friends about us.
It's the same for us. It's like, and what else is there to do? Like, this is it feels weird to keep making this return to the sort of early days of the internet, but it is like, if you're just talking to someone and you like this, like if you see something, say something, all of that stuff feels embarrassing, but it is also, what else are you going to do? We've been putting stuff of late, like we've realized that a lot of the things that I think of as like web, like I don't even know if it's 1.0, that like kotkey.org, Flipboard, shit like that. That stuff that it's still out there and people still use it. But those sorts of like very early days recommendation sites they're still useful, not just in terms of, like they're not driving a significant amount of traffic, although they do drive some, but it is like, that's where the people are. There are still people on those sites that are there because they want to find something interesting to read.
We get a lot of traffic, I mean, like relatively from fark.com, which I distinctly remember from like middle school computer lab. Like people had, it's like, but it's awesome because they have that community still. And it's like, it's human recommendations and, there's a commenter base and stuff like that.
Yeah. We have a similar thing. We actually have and I'm sure actually, Jason, you could probably commiserate. We have like pretty intense privacy policies as an organization because we do the stuff we say we want everyone else to do, which means that actually tracking where people are coming from is a little bit more difficult for us than, someone who doesn't care about privacy. But we do know sometimes that we get traffic from like Reddit communities, because like those are people talking to each other about a thing they like or are very interested in, or like Hacker News, or like these places that, I mean, EFF is also, all of our stuff is CC licensed, so people can republish it, and that helps, because again, we're not dependent on subscribers, we're just dependent on people donating, so we have like a different model. But like, it is always not just more but higher quality traffic, and people more likely to throw you a couple bucks if they get it that way.
We're literally like, if you enjoyed this article, please tell your friends about it at dinner. Like, please casually drop us into conversation at your birthday parties. Like, but it works, because often we will get emails from people, or like we had a party in LA recently, and they're like, I heard about you from my brother. I heard about you from my cousin. And it's a very fulfilling way to grow, but it's slow, and it requires, you know, it really requires you to have a community, which I think is very important, because I kind of doubt that a lot of Vice's traffic was coming from like, you have to like support Jason, you know,
Yeah,
like
it's important. Yeah, absolutely not. That wasn't the model they were trying to build.
I actually recently, a former EFFer texted me. He's like, what are the good independent media outlets? I need something. And I was like, 404. For you, a former EFFer who's interested in the tech world, like, go to 404. And he's like, I'll check them out. I was like, it's a good way of doing it. And like, it's very similar too to like my thoughts about a lot of things, which is like, people don't have a lot of time or money, right? Those are important resources. And so that's why too, like, the algorithm isn't worthwhile. A person you know, or a community you are a part of, saying go here is valuable, and a better way to decide how to spend your money or time than an algorithm shooting you some random stuff.
Yeah, it just is also harder to leverage. Like, we got an email just the other day from someone that was like, I encountered it was like a Drew McGarry story. He's like, I saw this and I didn't realize that you guys had started a new Deadspin. That's great. Like, I'll be reading it regularly. And it's like, turning 5 in 6 weeks. Like, and I'm not mad at the guy. I'm very happy to have him reading it. But there's a part of me that's like, well, what? I feel like we did a decent enough job. Like, it was in the newspaper. We've talked about it every chance we get. It's just, it's hard. It's hard to sort of get information through any of the many filters that are designed to prevent it.
When it comes to like social media, at least in the policy world, when I think about this and I think about like the work I do, I'm always like, there are two parts of this. We need competition. Like, we need, so that you don't feel like you have to be on Facebook to reach an audience. Mm-hmm. So that like you can make the principled stance that this company sucks and I don't want to be there. And if we have much more curated groups, then I need interoperability so that I can decide which ones I want, but have all of the feeds in one place, so that I don't go insane with 15 different logins. Like, those are the two parts that I need to function. I think about that from a policy perspective at EFF a lot.
We're going to bring back RSS very strongly.
Basically.
Yeah. We were talking earlier about how, you know, like, we talked to Defector, we talked to Remap, we talked to Aftermath, we talked to our peers in this space a lot and try to support each other. And I think that what we've heard from some of our readers, and a lot of them are very happy. It's like, we have money, we can support all of these websites. I think a lot of them are like, well, I can't subscribe to all of them, and it becomes like complicated, like all this login and things like that. And I think naturally the idea of like bundling the subscriptions together in some way like comes up. And we haven't had any like formal discussions about this. And like, in theory, that sounds like good to me. However, one of the reasons that these websites work is because there's not a lot of bureaucracy, because there's not a lot of like collaboration is the wrong word, but anytime you like involve multiple organizations and that sort of thing, it gets very complicated, and the back end gets complicated in all of this. And so I think a lot about like, how does one create like a better network of these websites without it bogging down what is so unique and special about them? And I think that we're all very like easygoing, like, we all get along. It's something that could be figured out, but it's like, there is a kind of a lot of back end infrastructure that would like need to be figured out. And it's just like I don't know if we'll get there. I don't know if that should even be the goal, but I think that for people who are curious, like why can't I just subscribe to 10 independent media sites all at once? It's like, well, it's kind of complicated, I think. It's just
Yeah.
like the infrastructure for it is
Another
tough.
one-
And that's part of what your grant is about, I assume.
Yeah,
But it's also, I mean, it's another one where you kind of do got to hand it to Nick Denton that like all of that stuff running on Kinja, all of those websites being like, if you're logged into comment on one, you're logged into comment on all of them. Good idea. It's another just one of those like 2008 ideas that turns out to have been like whenever the last good idea in online media happened. It's like certainly Barack Obama was president, but I don't know like when that was like when we sort of plateaued there. But yeah, I mean that Jason's point is exactly right. A lot of us use Alley as our back end, but not all of us. And it's also like it is different. Like we're not all in the same room. It's tough.
Yeah, and you don't want to like square the circle of like the different audiences. I think when I say like interoperability too, like I don't necessarily think it's like on you guys. Like if someone else wants to offer a service that figures out how to do all that to make it easier for people, it's like those 4,000 ads you get on every podcast about the thing Rocket Money or whatever that's going to like analyze what you are subscribing to and whether you're actually using it. Like there is a world in which someone builds the thing for people who want to do it that way, or for people who like maybe are more privacy dependent or like having different logins. It's about user choice and user empowerment so that they can give you money if they want to in the way that is best for them.
Yeah, that's another one where it would be great to suddenly wake up tomorrow and have $10 million we don't have now. That like because that is an expensive thing to build. And while, you know, you can teach a blogger how to run a Twitch stream and you can teach a blogger how to design and market a t-shirt and upload the images to Shopify, that is hard. Like what you just described, essential though it is, you know, that is like sort of the problem of discoverability and interoperability are like things that big media companies should be working on. But by their nature, they're going to be less inclined to do it. And it's the sort of thing, if you have to trust that like Substack is doing it, then I don't know that it's going to get done or that it's going to get done in a way that would benefit the right people.
Or it's like Apple News or something where it's just like
Or
feed
AMP.
exactly. And it's just like this is not the type of interoperability I was imagining. You get 3 cents because 7 people looked at your article. Like it needs to be the financial side of it, I think is important and tricky because it's like most of these sites cost about the same. Bundling presumably would make them cheaper in some way, but it's like, is this model sustainable if instead of getting $10 a month or $7 a month, you're getting like $1 a month? Like, would the finances make sense? And again, it's like we've learned a lot about business, but we're not running like regression analyses and like financial forecasting, like what happens if you do this. And I think I don't particularly want to do that either.
No. It's hard. And even I think also it's like we're the oldest of these sites, but we don't have enough information to know, certainly, you know, going forward on it. But like I don't even know that we've got enough data to do that sort of analysis successfully you know, for us. Like a couple of years of business during a time of like incredible upheaval in, you know, politics and economy is like hard to, you know, sort of draw any actual signal out of the, you know, overwhelming noise of all of that.
Well, the thing I do sort of hope is like when talking about this, I'm talking about this with you guys, people who live this, and that it's not just me thinking in my head this would make the most sense. And like having the audience that like we have at EFF or like they have at 404 is like maybe someone tries something and puts it on a GitHub repository and like it can be iterated on by other engineers. Like that's the dream, right?
To the extent that I'm capable, I mean, like that is something I think about all the time, and it's something that I would love to have happen. But that is where it would come from. I mean, the alternative is like it's some, you know, other proprietary thing, and then nobody else gets to share it.
I mean, it's when I always talk about it, I'm always like, these are like your sites, things like GitHub repository, like these are the good things of the internet. This is what the internet was supposed to be doing, is lowering these barriers for people so that they can make a blog and have an audience. And like, that's the stuff I want to preserve. And this like bloated monopoly internet is the stuff that we need to not have.
Yep.
Where can people find you in your work?
We are at 404media.co. We also have a podcast called the 404 Media Podcast. You can just type 404 Media into anywhere and we will probably show up.
Yep. And we're defector.com is the website. A lot of different podcasts that we do. The Distraction is the one I do with Drew McGarry. Normal Gossip is Rachel Hampton. That was Kelsey McKinney before. That's a, bigger one. But yeah, if you go to the website, you will see all of our stuff and links to all of our stuff. And you'll be able to read some stories for free too.
And we are EFF.org. Everything is free on our website. Usually on our front page is a list of bills in various places and our problems with them. Sometimes we think they're good. Mostly they are our problems with them. Act.eff.org makes it easy for you to message your representative. And that is what I tend to think of as the best. So thank you guys so much for this. This was great.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is fun. Thank you.